Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Dan Enthoven. I am from Domino Data Lab. So the first thing I'll do is just say welcome. Exciting for me to be in Boston. I used to work here a lot, and a good friend of mine lives here, and he moved here after college. But I had dinner with him the other night, and so for me it was just fun to get back to town. But I want to tell you about my dinner with John. It was really fun. We went to some Italian place. I had lobster with pasta, and I hadn't seen him in like 10 years. And so I'm like, hey, how's the wife? He's like, hey, the wife is fine. I'm like, oh, great. How are the kids? He's like, oh, the kids are fine. I'm like, really, how's your job? He's like, oh, work is fine. And then he asked me a question. He's like, hey, I haven't really been following it, but data science, like where is that in the hype cycle? And I was like, oh, that's a really good question. Fortunately, Google has an answer for everything. This is the Google trend, the data science since 2010. Thank you, Google. So it's up like 10x from 2010, which is interesting because you might have thought it jumped the shark or like machine learning was overtaking it or something, but this is really still a hot topic. And so it's kind of fun to be here and talking about it. The other thing that's really fascinating is I scrolled down on the page and guess what the most interested state in data science is? Woohoo, let's hear it for Massachusetts. For whatever reason, you guys are it. So I think we're in the right place to be talking about data science, and that's good. But why is it so interesting to me? Like, what do I like about it? So what I like most about being at Domino is the organizations I get to work with and engage with. Some of the ones like Enthoven uses Domino for blowout prevention in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's the Deepwater Horizon, whatever it was, blow up. They were not involved in that at all, neither was Domino. But they actually now use predictive models to figure out, is there a problem? Do you need to get the crews out there to stop something from blowing up? EasyJet has a really cool thing they're working on to try to predict what cities the big matches for soccer are going to be before it gets announced, because they want to be able to adjust their pricing accordingly. And that's Croatia losing to France in the Heartbreaker World Cup. I was in Croatia around that time, and so I was really sad. But they played a great game. And then New York City Police Department uses this for actually like identifying crime patterns and more proactively identifying like crime sprees among criminals. And that, of course, is the president's robbing the bank in the classic movie Point Break with Keanu Reeves. But Audubon uses it for saving birds, Sierra Bioscience for saving lives, Trupanion for saving pets, and Moody's for saving money, and Vivo for like serving up all those cool videos. So if you're ever on YouTube watching Taylor Swift videos, all of that's like Vivo and predictive models in the background figuring out videos you want to watch. The other thing that's interesting to me about this is that this is high stakes. Like, this is really important stuff. I mean, we all hear these great success stories. Amazon, 30% of their sales come from product recommendation models. Like, that's amazing to think about how much they sell and how much comes from that little, people that bought this also bought this thing. Netflix now greenlights scripts based on data science models that would say, oh yes, this is a movie that makes sense from a predictive science point of view. Allstate uses it for everything from like fraud identification to automatically processing claims, and just saving huge amounts of money and being more efficient as a company. On the downside, getting it wrong is disastrous. Knight Capital, for those that have forgotten about that one, was using predictive analytics, predictive models to front run trades in the New York Stock Exchange. They had a failed update to their model. It cost them $10 million a minute for about 45 minutes or so. They lost $450 million, and they were out of business promptly. So it's really dangerous to have a decision-making machine out there in the world making decisions with your bank account attached to it. Microsoft had the chatbot a while ago that was really bad. In the news yesterday, if folks haven't read the latest NTSB report on Uber and the self-driving car that killed that woman, it's shocking what their predictive models were doing. Among other things, their predictive model said there's no such thing as a pedestrian outside of a crosswalk. Like, what? So these things matter. And so it's important to do data science right. Okay, back to dinner with John. So he's interested in that. He's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, data science is a thing. But why don't you just throw all the data into the machine and let the machine figure it out? And this is a conversation I've had with so many people. Like, oh yeah, if you have enough data and you have a, artificial mind, you just throw it all together and the answer pops out. And so that was the next thing we talked about. And by the way, this is a real dinner. And if you ever saw John, you could ask him. This is exactly the conversation we had. He was going to invest in a company that was saying they could do that. So this is the big debate we've had at Domino for years, which is the idea of like a citizen data scientist. So Gartner came up with this a few years ago and then kind of pushing it, which is like that you can have somebody who doesn't really understand data science or statistics, but they can somehow like build models. It's the easy button, right? And you see this a lot. Back to data science projects from Microsoft. Remember Clippy? Oh, I think you're doing this. Maybe this is the answer. It really doesn't make sense to say, oh yeah, if you just have some data and somebody doesn't really understand statistics, they can do this. For all those reasons I talked about before about what happens when this goes wrong. So at Domino, we really believe that high stakes work needs experts. And not just experts, but the thing I often talk a lot about is it requires teams of experts, right? There's no full stack data scientist unicorn who can do the entire thing. You really want to have a collaborative effort. As we looked into this more, it turns out that that's actually really true. Research finds that again and again. It's data science teams putting models in productions that are being successful. Citizen data scientists, individuals, whatever, they're just not getting the job done. And a couple of stories we like to talk about with that is Bridgewater and Renaissance. These are two big venture funds. For those that don't know, the team that created Domino came out of Bridgewater. So they were at Bridgewater trying to solve like collaborative data science at scale problems. Problems we're solving here are problems that are present across like the world of data science. So instead of solving them as a bespoke solution at Bridgewater, maybe we should solve these as a product that the world can buy. But we'll talk about that down the road. But more importantly for these, Ray Dalio is a really interesting guy. He's in the news a lot lately. He has this book that's called Principles that you can buy or you can download for free if you Google it, about like just fundamentally how do you solve problems. And one of the things he talks about is by using algorithms and re-examining what your assumptions were and how you got there, you get better and better over time. You iterate, your knowledge compounds, and you build a better predictive engine with less emotion attached to it. And of course, Bridgewater famously is one of the best hedge funds in the world. Renaissance, very similar thing, which is, when people say, yeah, we have a model and we look at it, we make a decision emotionally, that's not it. If you're going to trade using models, you slavishly use the models and you do whatever the hell it says. So Bridgewater and Renaissance have been incredibly high performers in this space. And it's because they are really, really good at using data science to drive decisions. In fact, better than many other funds out there. This is a tough business. So backing off a little bit into the world, this is a McKinsey study that talks about front runners and like who's using data science and who's not. And it's their belief very much that the companies that are using data science are just going to crush it in the competitive landscape. And organizations that are following or not really adopting any of this are going to have a really hard time, right? So you say, well, what's going to happen to these companies that aren't thinking about this, that aren't managing data science at scale? They're going to die, right? The dinosaurs. People like to say that. It's actually not true, right? This is a very long, slow evolution. The dinosaurs apparently all died within like a few hours from when the asteroid hit. It was like this crazy thing. This is an evolutionary process and no one's really figured it out yet. That's one of the things that when I go out and talk to organizations, I find again and again and again, there's no one that really has this solved. And what they're all trying to do is they're all trying to figure out like, how do we get better? Like, what are other people doing? And that's a little bit why people come to Domino pop-ups and why we like to host these events, is that what we want is people to get together, talk, share ideas, and network. If you look at the agenda of speakers, it's nothing about like Domino as a product or even a company. And it's all about just like what's going on in the world of data science. How can we, as people that are trying to get better in this field as it evolves, how can we work together to do that? So I'm glad everyone's here. And I really hope that you take this as an opportunity, not just to listen and learn, but to network and learn, to stick around at the end and talk to people, make new connections, share ideas, take them back to your coworkers, etc. Back to my dinner with John. So this is true, by the way. I had dinner with John and all these questions he asked, because what does Domino do anyways? And so I just want to explain that very quickly because we are producing this event and I think it's an interesting story. So if you think about mission critical business functions, right, like sales or HR or finance, all these organizations are teams of people doing complicated tasks that involve long-term processes, and they all have platforms that help them organize that work so that it's a team effort that's stable, reliable, reproducible, et cetera. And when I go out in the field and I talk to organizations and ask them how they kind of manage that for data science, many of them struggle. The way to think of Domino is that what Workday is for teams of HR people managing large workforces, Domino is that for teams of data scientists and others trying to manage models at scale. We bring together the processes for collaboration, for reproducibility, for the life cycle from early exploration to publishing, all of that. And when I talk about like who's on those teams, like who do we engage with, it's all kinds of people, right? So it's IT architects who are saying, well, how do I provision compute resources? How do we connect people to data? How do we do this in an effective manner? It's the data scientists who are like, hey, I need to share my ideas with my coworkers, or I just need to get to a really big GPU for a while. And then it's the downstream stakeholders that say, well, it's great that he built that model, but how do I consume those results? Like, what am I going to do to take advantage of the predictive model that he has just built? And then on top of that, it's the data science leaders who are saying, well, hey, what's my team doing? What's in flight? Where are we in terms of our deliverables? And it's the IT leaders that saying, hey, we have to manage our investments wisely. We have to enforce security policies. We need oversight as to like what's happening with compute resources in this organization. So that's really what Domino is. So wrapping up with John, that sounds like a great event. Good luck. And at that, we shook hands and he went back on his way and I went to my hotel. But it was a really fun evening. It was great to see him again. So thanks for being in Boston so I could see my friend. And that's what I got. Thank you all very much.